Elite athletes do not train at the same intensity 365 days a year, because if they did, they would burn out. High-level athletes work with periodization, which is cycles of training that have built-in recovery. And their long-term performance is better because of it, not despite it. I'm telling you this because I think every human could benefit from knowing this and applying this to their own life in some way. Welcome to your daily hit of grace and grit, your quick dose of inspiration to kickstart your day. I'm Courtney Townley, and here is today's hit. So periodization is the practice of deliberately varying training intensity and volume throughout the year. And it is one of the most well-established principles in exercise science. We know that athletes who use it consistently outperform those who train at constant intensity. They sustain their performance better, they have fewer injuries, and they have a whole lot less burnout. And I am telling you this because I think that when we think of our life in that way, of periods of intense effort followed by periods of intentional rest and recovery, we tend to stay healthier. And the mechanism of this is very straightforward. The body adapts to a given stress, and then it requires either increasing intensity or deliberate recovery to continue to adapt. And look, we can only keep increasing intensity so much before we break. So building in the recovery makes a whole lot of sense. Training at constant high intensity without recovery results in a lot of things you don't want, right? Chronic overload, diminishing returns, and eventually a lot of breakdown, illness, injury, disease. The recovery periods aren't necessarily the absence of training. The training just looks very different. It's a form of deloading, removing the intensity of the training. And it's a really important part of the adaptation process. So years ago, when I first started this podcast, I interviewed Dr. Jade Teta on the show. And at the time, I'm not even sure if he's still doing this work, but at the time, he was very, very heavily involved in metabolic work, specifically for midlife women. And he's the one who actually introduced me to the concept of structured flexibility, allowing yourself to stay committed to self-care always, but allowing yourself to be flexible within what that looks like, depending on the actual resource availability of your life. Because ladies, we do not always have the same amount of time, energy, mental bandwidth, hormonal resilience to give, right? And based on what we have to give, we need to kind of use that as a filter for how hard we're pushing ourselves in certain areas of our life, not just exercise, but in life in general, how much we're committing to. And for midlife women, of course, we have this added challenge of hormonal transitions, right? So working through perimenopause and menopause. And research really clearly shows that the female body's recovery capacity and stress tolerance significantly changes during these times, and we become more sensitive to overload during the midlife transition. So what this means practically is that a woman who commits to walking every day might scale down to 10 minutes on days that she doesn't have a lot to give, and 45 minutes on days where she has a lot of energy to give. And the woman who has that kind of flexibility will outperform the woman who commits to a 60-minute program and abandons it completely when life intervenes. Right? So when we allow ourselves to be flexible, the thread doesn't break. It just changes texture. So adaptation is not a weakness. Being flexible is not a weakness. It is quite literally a strategy that keeps you in the game long enough for the game to compound. So extend yourself that grace of learning how to be flexible with your approach so you don't completely abandon your approach, because nothing good happens there. If this stirred something inside of you, imagine what a whole book of clarity and courage could ignite. The Consistency Code, a midlife woman's guide to deep health and happiness, goes even deeper into the mindset and practices that create real, meaningful change at midlife. Grab your copy today over at theconsistencycode.com and keep the momentum alive.